Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, August 1st, 2022, and this is a regular meeting of Moscow City Council. Kick us off, Maureen.
Let's all stand. First, let's say thank you for having air conditioning, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number one tonight is the consent agenda, and this consists of routine, relatively housekeeping style items and issues, and it's been vetted by either Public Works and Finance or the Administrative Committee, and any item can be removed by the request of any counselor. Gina.
Your Honor, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anne.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Haley.
Aye.
And Julia.
Aye.
Thank you. So the consent agenda passes on. Next up, staff recognition report. Anything from the staff?
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Okay. Mayor's appointments, I have none tonight. Next up is public comment in the mayor's response period for 15 minutes in 3-minute intervals. We're here to hear things on the mind of the public. Just come up and tell us what's on your mind with your name and address to lead off with, but it can't be on tonight's agenda or before Planning and Zoning or the Board of Adjustment. Any takers for public comment tonight? Okay, hearing none, we move on to the Citizen Commission report from the Sustainable Environment Commission. Kyle Steele and, you're not Kyle Steele, you're Kelly.
You were on it, Mayor.
And Steve McGinn eventually. Please go ahead.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Kelly Cooper, standing in for Kyle Steele, who is on vacation today. And I'm here to introduce Steve McGinn, the chair of the Sustainable Environment Commission. Give his annual report. Come on up, Steve.
Come on down, Steve.
Thank you, Kelly, and good evening, Mayor Betke and council members. I'm pleased to be here tonight and give you an update on the SEC, the accomplishments and activities we've had over the last year. I will keep it brief, might be even briefer if I don't know how to run this thing. Okay, we're in business. So I thought I'd start off with just a brief synopsis of the mission statement for the Sustainable Environment Commission, and that is to solicit advice and information about sound environmental management practices with the idea of promoting the public health and safety of our citizens of Moscow. And I know we've talked a little bit about the mission statements. That might have been tweaked, but that you get the general idea of what we're trying to do. And a little bit of the structure, our meetings once a month, third Tuesday of the month, 6 p.m. in this very building. We've taken advantage of the council chambers from time to time, particularly when we have large attendance and we're not crammed in the mayor's conference room. A couple of ideas on where we get our agenda topics. Many of these come from the members of the SEC, as well as responses to citizen concerns and questions, and also, of course, council, if they have such a desire to plant a seed for us to look at. We also have standing committees, standing reports from Kelly and Kyle, as well as Ian Schlater as our current Moscow High School representative. And then we have a standing committee called the Climate Action Working Group that I'll talk a bit more about here in another slide or two. We do make an effort to collaborate with other commissions. We think that's really important. There's a lot of cross-pollination and a lot of interest that there have multiple facets that transportation, police pathways, et cetera, that might be interested in. So we have gone out and reached out to them. Parks and Rec would be another one. And then we do invite and enjoy guest speakers. There's a lot of expertise on the police, and having them in has been very beneficial. What I'm going to do in the next couple of slides is just give you some examples. I won't go through the agenda by agenda, month by month. I know you have a busy agenda on the plate this evening. Climate change. Certainly that's been on the minds and on the agenda, the Sustainable Environment Commission, as well as pretty much everybody that's living and breathing on this earth right now. We're involved in it in a couple of ways. First and foremost, City Council itself has identified climate change as an issue, as a major challenge that should be part of the city's strategic plan. And with that, city staff were instructed or tasked to begin developing a climate action plan. And we have several people, one of which is Kelly, that has done a fair amount of work in putting this document together. It's my understanding it's in draft form now. It's gone through public input, workshops. The city's done a very, very good job of not just ramming something through. And it's a very important process, a very important document and concept. And so taking the time necessary to review it and make sure it's thorough, accurate, and practical is something that the council is doing, and I think doing a good job. My understanding is with staff leadership now, and you will be seeing a copy of it here shortly. So the Climate Action Working Group is involved in it. First, a little bit of background. COG, as it's called, started as a subcommittee for the Sustainable Environment Commission, and over time, in the last 2 years in particular, has expanded to involve university expertise, a lot of people from the community, other stakeholders, and things like that. So it really is a nice, diverse group of people that meet periodically and discuss many things, but the Climate Action Plan has been one of them. Specifically, the COG has worked with city staff to review and discuss the draft of the Climate Action Plan. Also presented a copy of the CAP to other commissions. They've done a very good job of just not surprising people with this, but going out, reaching out, presenting it to other commissions and getting input, because it's an iterative process. It's a very complex idea that's trying to be developed here. And so getting a lot of input, thinking about it, and going through edits and things like that is a necessary part. These are things that have been done in the past. Moving forward, some of the things that COG and the SEC will be pursuing, will be investigating how other cities, including Boise, are dealing with climate action planning. That we can learn a lot. So we're not inventing the wheel here in Moscow. Many, many, many cities throughout the U.S. are dealing with the same issue. And so getting an idea of how that's being done is very, very important. And then as the COG has grown in diversity and scope, certainly the idea of continuing to bring together city staff and representatives of both universities as well as the high school and interested community members will be a continued part of what the COG and the SEC will be up to over the next year or so. Farmers market. We've been involved in the farmers market primarily. We table at the farmers market. This is something that citizens commissions are invited to do. And our most recent tabling event was supposed to be in May, I think it was. And we seem to have a knack for timing it with the worst rainstorm of the month. And so we postponed it to July. And it was July 2nd this year, which turned out to be a much nicer day. A couple of things that occurred at that tabling event. Seed packets were handed out. These were native seeds that Kelly and a lot of people have put together with artwork from Palouse. Did I get it right? Palouse Prairie School? Good. I was going on my memory there, which is always dangerous. If you haven't received one of these packets, I believe there are still some sitting around, and they are collector's items. The idea here is to promote pollinator-friendly gardens, which is a great thing and certainly well received at the farmers market. Also, it's a great way to do some outreach and just let people know, the market goers, what's going on. A lot of them will divert their eyes and walk by so they can go get their burrito or cinnamon roll. But those that do stop by are very interested in, first, I didn't know the city had a Sustainable Environment Commission. So we explain that to them. And then also just get their idea in particular on the climate action plan. But in a nutshell, of the market goers informally surveyed, overwhelmingly supportive and interested and glad that the climate action plan is being pursued by the city. One negative comment had really nothing to do with the cap. A woman was very concerned about trees dying, which of course is related to climate action plan, but nothing within the purview of the SEC. But just so you'll know, there is a concern over dying trees, which we share with them. trash. We're dealing with trash. Solid waste, to be more specific. And one of our guest speakers most recently was Steely Johnston, which is with the Inland North Waste. And she gave an excellent presentation. Unfortunately, I was out of town, but I'm getting this secondhand. But the response from the SEC members was very good. And I don't have time tonight to go through everything that she shared with us, but it focused on the importance of composting in solid waste management. And in particular, the idea that by diverting compostable organics from the waste stream will certainly extend the lifetime of our current landfill. And then, as many of you know, we have a transfer station as well. And keeping some of those composted materials out of that certainly reduces the tonnage that's hauled to Oregon. And there's many, many great ideas that came out of this. Keep this one as a pending topic, because certainly it's something the SEC will be looking at, and certainly inviting Tim Davis back. He's been key. He's been at our meetings once or twice already, and there's lots more to come on this one. Solid waste is certainly something that everybody, and including the council members, should be aware of and looking for innovation to address this important problem. Lastly, we had a guest speaker from Washington State University, Professor Omar Al-Hassawi, if I'm pronouncing his name right. And his topic was a changing world brings a changing curriculum, or necessitates a changing curriculum. And he's developing a program for carbon conscious construction. If I get that mouthful out without tripping over myself. And the idea there is recognizing, first and foremost, residential housing accounts for a lot of greenhouse gas emissions in the form of energy use. So certainly anything you can do in innovative building construction is going to be well worth it. And Professor Al-Hassawi's program will train the next generation of architects, and also provide valuable information to neighboring cities on how to develop a comprehensive energy efficiency program for building construction. And certainly what's happening in the Palouse right now with new construction, we should be paying attention to this program. I think it's a very important one moving forward. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Mayor's Earth Day Awards. This has been an annual event, 2-year hiatus, compliments of COVID. But when this came back up earlier this year, I got a hold of the mayor and said, hey, are you interested in doing this? And he did exactly that via email, but a double thumbs up. He was wholeheartedly supportive of this. The idea of the Mayor's Earth Day Award is to recognize Moscow residents and organizations that are conducive to environmental sustainability. The SEC's role in this is to solicit nominations, organize these, send it off to the mayor, and then it's the mayor's purview as to who he selects. This year's organization, I won't read them all to you, but every organization and individual on here is certainly deserving of the award. And so, Mayor Betke, I thank you very much for continuing this fine tradition. We have a lot of great people doing great things in this town, and this is certainly a wonderful way to organize or recognize it. Lastly, I would certainly be remiss if I didn't thank the members of the SEC. I'm just here speaking for them tonight. I won't name all the names, but those of you who live in town will recognize many of them. I think it's very fortunate that we have a full slate of at-large members as well as county members. An MHS seat currently occupied by Ian Schlater, Olivia from the University of Idaho, and then certainly the city staff, Kelly and Kyle and Julia in Zoom land, it looks like. Thank you, Julia, for being our council liaison. The meetings are very, very eventful. We never seem to have lack of things to talk about. And one of my big jobs as chair is to try to keep it to 2 hours or less so everyone can go home and get to bed at a decent time. With that, I want to say thank you to the council and to the mayor for your attention and ask if there are any questions.
Questions, councilors? No questions. Dang.
You let me out that easy?
Oh, well done. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Appreciations to all the members of the SEC as well, because they do a super job of vetting a lot of information, processing a lot of information, and bringing us solid recommendations for action by the city. So thanks so much, especially with that climate action plan.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, next up is a public hearing for the City of Moscow's fiscal year 2023 annual budget. Public hearings are a fairly formal and structured event. It opens up with the staff presenting information, followed by questions from council. After that, we hear from the public for any input they may have in 3 distinct sections: in favor of, opposed, or general comments. 3-minute increments there. So if you're going to come up and speak, please remember 3 minutes, and it goes by lickety-split. So cut to the chase. After that, the council holds its deliberations and then engages in 3 potential actions. First one dealing with foregone tax recovery resolution. Second being the ordinance pertinent to the budget itself. And third, the authorization of the execution of the L2 property tax form for the county. So with that, staff, please go ahead, and public hearing is opened.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening. As the mayor introduced, we are here to review the proposed fiscal budget for the city for the FY 2023 fiscal year, beginning October 1 of this year, carrying till the end of September of next year. The city's budget is a fiscal plan that sets out our anticipated revenues, expenditures for the operations of the municipal corporation, all the aspects and all the services the city provides and renders. It includes the revenues from a variety of sources, from property taxes, state shared revenues, grants, and other sources. And the expenses represent the cost for the delivery of services, operations of utilities, capital construction, and accumulation of funding for future projects. This budget is also guided by the city's strategic plan, where the council has identified major challenge areas that the community is facing and wish to prioritize efforts and resources towards addressing those. Just to kind of recap on the current major challenge areas for Tier 1, which are deemed to be the most important items, we have inadequate emergency radio infrastructure. As the council has received reports on that project actually is underway. This budget includes $2.4 million this year to advance that, to address areas in the community where we cannot communicate to firefighters and police officers in buildings and in certain areas of the community, which presents a significant safety hazard. We also have the Npds wastewater violations at our water reclamation facility. Those are primarily related to temperature standards, something we've been working on for a number of years. The council just received a report on the facility plan that was just completed, and the selection of a chiller installation as being the preferred alternative to address those violations. That work is underway. This budget includes a little over $2 million to start design and prepare for construction of that project as well. Aging storm drain system was an area identified as well. 2 years ago, the city formed a new stormwater utility, and that work continues. There's $400,000 in this budget to address capacity enhancements in the city's stormwater system. Deteriorating pavement conditions is an ongoing challenge and issue. It is a function of the city that has somewhat limited funding sources, but we continue to invest in pavement management program. We have over $2 million towards roadway improvements in this budget, looking forward to next year. For Tier 2 challenge areas, insufficient revenues jeopardize service levels. This is always an ongoing challenge and issue for our community. It just takes careful management of our resources and our financial resources towards those expenditures. That also goes for insufficient capacity to maintain service demands. Again, careful management of resources, our staff, we do the best we can to provide those services. Deteriorating wastewater collection system is an area of the Tier 2 identified, and we have funding in this budget to address replacement of old and deteriorating clay mains, address infill and infiltration into manholes and other areas of the wastewater system, as well as begin design for rehabilitation of lift stations. Lack of backup power drinking for water wells. That item will actually be completed this year with the completion of the Well 6 house reconstruction, as well as the backup power installation. And declining city water supply has been and will continue to be a longstanding issue. We are making efforts towards identifying that future alternate water supply, and the council will be receiving a report on that project coming up here in September. And climate change science highlights needs for significant action. As the council just heard the report from the Sustainable Environment Commission, the climate action plan will be advancing to the council here in the short term as well. And then at Tier 3, we have service growth demands are outpacing resources, somewhat similar to some we had in Tier 2. Again, careful management of those resources. Inadequate facility pre-plans and commercial inspections for fire. We added a full-time fire inspector in 2015 that has helped address that issue. Inadequate residential and training facilities. We have completed a facility study looking at how we could expand the residential program, as well as add additional training facilities, and that work is ongoing. And then the aging downtown infrastructure in the center of community social and cultural activity. Again, that's a deterioration of many of the hardscape and other improvements in the downtown area that were constructed in 1981, so approaching 40 years in age and showing that. You'll hear a report on that project this evening. And lack of affordable housing creates economic disadvantages. The council took action in creation of the Affordable Home Ownership Grant Program, and we have awarded funds for the construction of housing units this year. As we look at the budget itself, for new personnel, we have the reestablishment of the prior human resources manager. That was a position that had been left vacant for some time period, added to another, to Jen's duties and responsibilities, and the demands are just too great, and we need to bring that position back. We also have a part-time 19-hour per week EMS billing specialist to assist the fire department in documentation and billing for EMS services delivered. We also have a number of positions that were eliminated. We had the Environmental Education and Sustainability Program Specialist, which was combined with our Conservation Program Coordinator position, which resulted in the elimination of one position. We also eliminated an Administrative Specialist position, the Public Safety Digital Media. This was a position that was created in anticipation of public records requests related to the Police Department's body cam program, which we really just haven't been materialized, and we've identified we can handle that with existing staff. And we also had a staff engineer position in the community development department was removed. So we actually have a net reduction of about 1.5 positions this year in the budget. For capital projects, we presented the council with the 10-year capital improvement plan that identifies forecasted future capital expenditures. Within the water fund, we are estimating 16.3 million, sewer funds 35.8, roadway and transportation improvements at 14.8, 7.2 for parks and recreation, and then just a little bit over $500,000 in general facilities. All told, over the course of the next 10 years, we are estimating a need for just about 75 million in capital construction across the city's operations. As we look to just the upcoming year for this budget, within the water fund, we have the replacement of the Indian Hills and Ponderosa booster stations. That's budgeted about 3.9 million. We also have the well 2 and 3 filter plant rehab. We're starting the design on that project at about 78,000. And we have 2.3 million identified for various water line improvements, primarily focused on large transmission system improvements to move water from our newly developed well 10 on the west side of town across to the east side of the community where it's used. In the sewer fund, we have $1.8 million in sewer main replacements to address those deteriorating mains. And we are starting that next phase of work on the water reclamation facility for the permit violations. 2.8 million is budgeted to begin the design for phase 5 on that project. We also have 166 for lift station renovations as well. For stormwater, we have 400,000 in stormwater conveyance improvements. And in sanitation, we have recycling center improvements. This is funding that's been held to potentially relocate or improve the existing recycling center facility, estimated about 3.4 million. Other general improvements at 2 million and post landfill closure funding at 1.6. For general fund capital in the roadway improvement program, as I mentioned, we have about 2.2 million budgeted for roadway improvements, 365,000 in streetscape work, 45,000 for the sidewalk program, and 65,000 for park building improvements. For park improvements, we have 340,000 that's identified for our contribution of the Mosier Park frontage improvements. So as that next phase of the Rolling Hill subdivision extends up there, we have an obligation to cover our frontage improvements. And we also have 18.5 for playgrounds. That'll be the safety tiling replacement for the Friendship Square playground, and then 81,000 in swimming pool improvements related to additional funbrella installations and moving the fence to expand to provide more space to accommodate customers at the pool. I'll spend a fair amount of time this evening talking about property taxes because we're in kind of a unique situation right now with our market, and I want to make sure the council understands the implications of that. It is important to understand the dollar amount, and there are statutory limits on how we increase that levy every year. By statute, the city is able and legally able to increase our levy by 3% to account for inflation. We also are allowed to bring in the valuation of new construction. Now that has been limited to 90 value as a result of House Bill 389. But that is to bring in that new construction value for those properties to pay for the services of new development. And then you can take up to 1% of foregone. And when we talk about foregone taxes, if there was a year where you did not take the 3% increase that was allowed, then you can bank that. And in the future, you can go back and you can collect those revenues. You can add 1% foregone for ongoing expenses and 3% for one-time capital expenses. And then once that capital expense is completed, then that comes off the city's levy. The levy is spread across the total assessed valuation of the city. And valuations or variations in assessments of valuations and how they change can shift who pays and essentially the relative tax burden among property classes. There are multiple parties involved in property tax. You have the taxing districts, cities, counties, cemeteries, libraries, highway districts that all set a budgetary levy amount. You have county assessors that are required to assess the value of properties at current market value. That levy amount that is set by the taxing districts is then applied across that valuation to calculate a levy rate. And the county treasurer then collects the taxes and essentially distributes them to the taxing entities. Within the city of Moscow, if you look at $1 of tax collected, 25 cents is to the city's base levy. That is our general operations. 4 cents is allocated to our bond payments for the 2019 bond election when the community passed a bond measure to incur debt to construct a new police station as well as other facility building improvements. 34 cents of that dollar would go to the Moscow School District, another 3 cents to the Moscow School District's facility bond, 23 cents to Latah County, 1 penny to the Cemetery District, 7 cents to the Highway District, and 3 cents to the Latah County Library District. So in total, for every dollar collected, 29 cents would be received by the city, and the rest are distributed to the other taxing entities. The budget as proposed to you for the FY23 year includes the allowable 3% increase. So that's $197,491. It also includes 1% of the foregone for ongoing operational expenses. And that's estimated to add about 82 cents per month or $9.83 over the tax year for a home that was assessed valuation of $400,000. It also includes 90% of new construction valuation, that was $64,000, as well as 90% of the annexation value, that's $772. So all told, the total property tax increase in revenues is $331,260. The assessed valuation this year made a remarkable move. It moved up 27.6% in this current year, about $500 million in valuation in 1 year. And much of that is driven by existing property values that appreciated, and especially residential property values. As a result of that, because we're dividing our total levy amount just across assessed valuation, our levy rate dropped. So for the current fiscal year, we're in $8.08 per thousand of assessed valuation. As we look ahead to the next year, it's estimated at $4.10 per thousand valuation. So as that valuation grows, that levy rate drops, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. We are currently experiencing inflation not seen in nearly 50 years, with significant increases across all aspects of our operations: fuel, personnel, labor, materials, everything. We've seen cost increase. Nearly every capital bid that we've opened has been substantially above engineers' estimates. We have seen construction costs escalate as well this year. And for nearly the first year, I think we were just about an even match last year, just the police services budget now exceeds our property tax levy. So it's $7.2 million for the total cost of operations of the police department. Our general fund levy amount is a 6.8. And consumer prices have increased 9.1% over the last 12-month period ending in June. So we're seeing kind of a very unique time, both in the national economy and local economy as well. Also like to compare our levies across the state. So these are cities ranging from 10 to 50,000 in population. The average valuation or the average levy amount is just under $5. So you can see our levy last year, shown in the some center bar there representing us, was right about the total average amount across all the comparable cities. And then we compare our total levy amount, so not the rate per thousand, but the total amount of money that the city receives for the levy, which are the red dots there, compared to the total assessed valuation of a city, which are the bars. You can see Moscow shown here. These pointers are a little bit tricky. You see, this is our valuation. Last year was roughly 1.5 billion. And the total property tax levy was just about 6.5 million. So you see what was collected there. We are still fairly low overall when you compare us, say, to Lewiston, which brings in about 24 million on their levy amount with a much higher valuation as well. So generally, our levy rate has been low or comparative, and the total levy dollars that we bring in are fairly low as well. And a lot of that is a function of where the city's levy was before the early property tax freezes were established back in the 70s and 80s. And that ended up freezing cities' levies where they were at that time with limited abilities to increase in the future. So every year you'll see this, and you can't read this obviously on the screen, but this is the sheet that compares the current year's fiscal tax revenues and the forecasted tax revenues. We're really going to kind of focus on, I'm going to enlarge this table on the bottom, which is something we show every year, is how does this change looking next year? How does it impact the tax burden on that individual property? So this assumes a home with a $350,000 valuation, with a $100,000 value for the lot, $250,000 for the home, total assessed valuation $350,000, less the homeowner's exemption of $125,000 gives you a net taxable valuation of $225,000. The city's non-exempt levy, essentially our base levy, that'd be $983 per year for that home. And then our exempt levy, which is the bond amount, would be $158,000. So the total city tax levy for that property for a year would be $1,142. As we look to 2023, as that valuation grew, that levy rate dropped. And so I'd love to tell you this is what people are going to realize is that their tax bill would go down $219 per year. But the reality is the residential market specifically, average values increased about 40% this year. So this is not necessarily telling the true story. And I want to make sure the council is aware of that. If you look at our valuation from 2012 to 2021, it's grown 41.8% over that 10-year time period. Residential average sales price of residential homes has increased 50% over that time period. So most of the growth was happening in that sector. In this 1 year, the overall assessed valuation grew 27.6% in 1 year compared to 41.8%. And many residential properties saw a 40% increase in 1 year. So the assessed valuations went up dramatically this year. And again, that reflects the current market values. We, for a long period of time since the Great Recession, new home construction was half of our historical rates. And so the inventory that should have been constructed, another 300 to 400 homes over that last 10 years, weren't constructed. And that curtailed supply. And when demand peaked, especially peaked during the pandemic, as people relocated to different locations with remote work, it drove the value and has been the fastest growing state over the last several years. So we've seen that pressure on the real estate market and driving those prices up higher. And the assessor is statutorily bound to assess at the current market value. So if you compare that same $350,000 home, so the top is what we just looked at, $219 reduction in property tax burden. But if that home saw the 40.5% increase in valuation, that home went from $350,000 to $491,000 in 1 year. And the net impact of that valuation growth is an increased tax city levy amount of $362 for the year. Now, if we were to look at that and assess how much of that is due to our 3% and our 4% foregone compared to just a valuation shift, this bottom table shows you if we did not increase our levy at all and took in only the same dollar amount that we did this year and didn't account for the inflation and increased costs that we're experiencing, that homeowner would still see $300 of tax increase. That's just happening from the valuation and the shift of that tax burden. So our increase that is proposed in the budget this year is $62 of that increase that you're seeing. So residential properties, as I mentioned, have appreciated much faster than commercial properties. The state has chosen not to adjust or index the homeowner's exemption, which in the past had been that leveling effect between residential and commercial properties. It was increased 2 years ago from the 100 to 125,000, but it wasn't indexed or changed, and it certainly hasn't kept pace for the 40% growth of the market that we've seen. As I mentioned, we saw that record increase in residential valuation, 40% in 1 year compared to 50% over 10 years that we saw in the prior decade. The city's valuation represents about $63.41 of that growth, where just the increased valuation alone, and really this is not generating any money, it's just shifting who pays the bill, is increasing approximately $300 for the year. So and this is not to pick on any individual property, it's just some things we can identify with, some businesses you may be aware of. So I took a restaurant, a retail store, a multifamily apartment complex, and a single family home, and kind of compared what is happening for those 4 properties this year. So one of the restaurant was McDonald's on the Pullman Highway, had a 2021 assessed valuation of $807,000. The 22 valuation is $906,000. The city levy amount in 21 was $4,100. The levy amount for 22 would be $3,692. Which is a reduction of $410 just looking at the city's levy over the course of the year. If you were to look at the Kestrel apartment complex on White Avenue, right across the street from near where I live, 120 unit apartment complex, assessed valuation in 2021, $8.9 million, valuation in 22, $9.1 million. So it moved up only 2.2% in valuation. The city tax levy for that property would drop by almost $8,000 next year. Under retailer furniture center on the Pullman Highway, 21 value, 1.1 million, 22 value, 1.26. I had about 13.6% valuation increase, but the tax bill will go down $467 for the year for the city levy. A house on White Avenue, mine, because I was familiar with it, had an assessed valuation for 2021, $333,800. 21 city taxes were $1,061. The new 22 value is $469,088, and the city taxes will be $1,410 for the year. So mine was one of those 40.5% valuation increases in 1 year. The city levy increase will be about $350 on my home. And then the final column, if historically, if the city's levy rate is 29% of the total, this will compound with the other taxing districts because everything will shift over. And so if you consider other taxing districts' levies, the McDonald's tax bill will go down $1,400 next year. The apartment complex will go down $27,000. The furniture center would go down $1,600, and then the single family home would go up $1,200 for the year. So about $100 a month is what the increase will be. So I'm going through this because of kind of the unusual circumstances we're having in the market this year. And I'd love to tell you that it was going, the property owners' values tax bill is going to go down 219, but that wouldn't be telling the whole story. So I'll make sure the council was aware of that. As you look, this is just a chart of our levy rate historically. So you can see there are two dips in the levy rate. 2021 was a year that we participated in the Governor's Safety Initiative, where they provided CARES Act funding if cities lowered their levy amount, and then the funding could be applied to paying for emergency service personnel expenses. So you see that drop in the levy rate, and the solid gray bar is our general fund levy, and then the light green is bond levy. So we had the swimming pool, which was the bond that was retired in 18. We had no levy amount in 19, and then the police station bond came on in 20. But you'll see that reduction in 21 for the Governor's Safety Initiative, and that was just an artificial because of that program. But you see our levy continue to drop down in 2022, I guess, in response of that valuation growth. So as we look at it for the 23, so the adopted 2022 general fund property tax is about 6.49 million. The budget as proposed would be 6.8. We also have the bond and interest fund that's remaining fairly static. It was $1,047,000 in 2022. It'll be $1,046,400 for 2023, making a total city of Moscow property taxes for the FY23 fiscal year at $7,859,000 as proposed. Utility rates in the budget, we do have some increases. The water utility rates would increase by 5%, sewer 2.25%. Stormwater will have no increase. In sanitation, there's kind of an equalization in the sanitation. As you saw, we had the rate study that was the council received here about 2 months ago. Part of that indicated we were charging a little bit too much for the resident, or too little for the residential roll carts, and a little too much from mechanical containers, and there's a plan to equalize that cost of service. So for this year, residential roll carts will increase 4.9%, while mechanical containers will be reduced by 3.2%. General tipping fees, sanitation fees will increase by 2% as a whole. If we look at overall revenue sources, property taxes in the blue here represent about 7.29% of the city's total revenues. Other large sources include charges for service. Those are obviously utility fees mostly. We have a large fund balance portion for our capital fund, so that funds and accumulates funding for those future capital projects. We have capital transfers and operating transfers also as large pieces, and then intergovernmental revenues are probably the last one. So those are the predominant funding sources. Those numbers are shown here. I'm just going to hide you, Julia, just for a second. So you see the property taxes, 7.9 million. Charges for services, 28 million. Capital transfers or fund balance at 41 million, and operating transfers at 8.4 million, 4.2 for a second phase of revolving loan funding for the water system improvements. So those are all the major revenue sources for the city, totaling 109,189,264. Then as we look at our expenditures, where do they go? A large portion of our expenditures are in enterprise fund capital development, so those large capital investments in water and sewer utilities. So that's the green, get to the pointer, the green shown here. Internal service funds, which includes fleets and information systems, are there. And then we have general government is the area shown in gray, at about 6.9%. But you can see the general outline. Public safety alone, about 10% there. So that's police and fire and other public safety components. As we look specifically at the general fund, so this is not including either special revenue operations or enterprise funds. A large portion of the city's general fund, which is just about 20 million, 35.6% goes to the police. So the police department, again, it was 7.2 million this year, is a large component of our operation. The other one that's large is non-departmental. That's only large because that's where we transfer funds out, and largely for parks and recreation services. Those are largely funded by general fund funds. And so we transfer about 2.8 million from the general fund out to the parks and recreation funds for those services. And then community development is probably the next largest behind there for all the engineering staff for all those capital projects at about 11.6%. Again, there's the dollar amount there showing total general fund of 20,275,000. So council action this evening. The proposed budget was reviewed and recommended for approval by the council at our July 18th workshop to review this and go through line item by line item. The public hearing is being held tonight to receive public comment on the budget. And upon consideration of any testimony received, staff recommends that the council approve the foregone tax recovery resolution. So there are 3 actions this evening. One is to approve the resolution for the 1% foregone. The second would be to approve the ordinance, the appropriation ordinance, under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings that be read by title and published by summary. And then the last action is for the council to authorize the mayor's execution of the L2 property tax certification in the aggregate amount of $7,859,905. An updated current version of the L2 has been presented before you. And with that, I would be happy to try to answer any questions that the council may have.
Questions from anyone on council?
That's my questions earlier at the previous meetings, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on, for the public input portion of the public hearing. First, those who wish to speak in favor of the actions here tonight. You remember how it works, Victoria.
Okay, Victoria Seaver, Moscow. One of the best predictors of future behavior is past behavior. While the makeup of the city council may change because it's 6 people put in office by staggered elections, in my time of routinely attending meetings, including July's budget workshop, It has frugally prioritized projects and taxed accordingly, even if I don't always agree. When council deemed it could do the job on less than the allotted 3%, it taxed less. That's why we even have foregone tax money. It's well known that the cost of business has skyrocketed. The city is not immune. It would be surprising if you didn't take the full 3% and some foregone tax. Additionally, with the diligent staff we have, you have leveraged funds significantly with grants, regional collaboration, and innovation. Moscow operations are made up of Moscow citizens looking out for their community. Overall, I support the budget decisions reached. I encourage you to continue ramping up public outreach and facilitate business development and citizens' wise use of resources with their fiscal, social, and ecological complex interactions. A couple of specific points. I'm looking forward to the downtown streetscape improvement. Curb appeal cannot be underestimated. 2, awarding the Arpa funds was a sensitive and difficult undertaking, not yet completed. So at their conclusion, we would like to receive some insight from each of you as to your decision points. Many votes were not unanimous, and the underlying reasoning would be instructive. And 3rd, as to the strategic plan, which informs how you spend the money, you are embarking on some fine-tuning changes. Most elements are evident. We drive the roads, we measure the water, we count the bricks, and so forth, so to speak. I urge you to focus on the ones to continue to focus on ones more subtle or elusive, but every bit as urgent, such as affordable housing and the local response to changing climate conditions. Don't drop the ball. Play it as best you can.
Thank you, Victoria. Further testimony and support. Okay, moving on. Testimony and opposition. And testimony of a general nature. Okay, at this point, the public hearing is closed and the council launches into its deliberations. Council, please deliberate.
Go ahead, Maureen.
I find the budget time always very insightful to me. And what I've come to recognize every year is that there are a lot of services that we provide here and that we do it within very tight fiscal constraints. And that I really appreciate our staff for all the work that they do. And I appreciate living in Moscow because of all the amenities we have and how well we run it. It's an incredibly tight ship. And so thank you for everybody in the city for having pulled this together, and Sarah for making it more understandable this year than ever for me. And so I just want to say thank you. And I really want to say that we only saw one chart between us and Lewiston, but if you look at all those charts that Bill put together, or someone put together, it keeps showing how much more money everyone else spends than we do. And I want to say, not everyone, but not everybody. We're not at the bottom, but we're surely not at the top. So I just want to say thank you for everybody on the city for the hard work that they do.
Sandra.
So, we had a really great budget hearing before, and I felt like we had a lot of good conversation and deliberation, which is why you may be wondering how we're not deliberating a whole lot right now, because we did considerable amount a couple weeks ago. And really just to say they're hard decisions, and no one wants to have to pay more money ever, right? And so, it's just hard. It's a painful time. It's also a really good time. I had told folks earlier that going through this budget process this year was really, it made the most sense, and it went surprisingly well, and it was well thought out. And that's because of the staff that we have and the way that they do work together and not in opposition, but they work as a team to try and figure out the best ways to make the most of the money that we have. And I think they're doing a great job of that. And just second the thanks to Sarah and her team in the finance for the hard work they did, but to all of our departments. It's a Herculean effort, and I'm grateful for it and grateful for where we're at right now.
Gina?
Well, I want to say ditto, and that sounds glib, but this is no small task once a year. And we don't always make it as city councilors as easy on our city staff as we could. And so it is always akin to childbirth, and it's important. And I appreciated Victoria's statement about diligent frugality. I would say diligent, deliberate frugality is kind of the way we do things. And it's impressive to me every year. And I just, I feel good about it.
Haley?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I really appreciate that Bill and his team took a lot of time to also make sure that we're paying our people as best we can what they're worth. I think a lot of our folks are probably still not getting paid quite what they're worth, but I appreciate that the essential services that we're providing and some of the things that we're talking about here also include getting our folks who are under market value at least close to the mark. And it's important because I don't know what we're going to do if we have 2 or 3 of our 20-year veterans in the wastewater facility walk away. It's really important that that doesn't change. That's not different than any other business environment right now. It's a tight labor market. And so I really appreciate the work that your teams have done to make sure that our people feel valued. So, and I got to ask a lot of questions at the budget hearing, so I'm feeling good.
Ann?
It's really top of mind for me that I think this is a tough economic time for a lot of people. Their rents are higher, their gas bills are higher, their grocery bills are higher. And so it's just, it's tough to look at the history, and we're talking about 50 years, right? That we haven't seen inflation like this in that long. And it's just difficult as a city. I feel like I wish there was more that we could do to address it. The best graphs I've seen show that, 20 years ago, the split between residential and commercial used to be about 50-50, and now it's closer to 70-30. And that's going to continue going in that direction. And there's only so much we can do as a municipality. So it's just tough. I think I'm excited about where we're at and the fact that we're addressing what we've identified as our major challenge areas across the different tiers. I think that's a really big deal. We're not just letting those sit there, whether that's infrastructure or the stuff that makes this community livable. But it's a tough year generally.
Bill?
If I might make just a small clarification, there were a couple of comments made about a prior budget hearing, and that was our workshop on July 18th. This is the only official hearing. Just want to make sure people didn't feel like they missed a hearing that may have occurred on the budget. So,
Thank you.
So I'd make a comment here too. Julia, I'm forgetting you. You're so inconspicuous. Any comments? Thank you.
Well, I want to reiterate what Ann said. This is a difficult year, and I hate that we have to increase our tax rate, but I do think that the city staff did the best that they could in terms of maintaining our services and dealing with inflation. So I do appreciate the frugality, and I'm right there with you as a fellow homeowner. So that's all. I think I asked all my questions during the workshop.
Thanks. Sorry for omitting you. But I think it's important for us all to remember that we're running at 9.1% inflation, but the combined increase, we're looking at 3% plus 1% foregone, which does not come close to keeping up with inflation. So we tried to keep the budget very tight, keep it limited. Another point that I don't think was mentioned was the assessed value. We're essentially running a whole city on half of a assessed value base. Moscow, I think, comes in at about 2.8 billion altogether.
including exempt properties, correct?
Yep, about 2.8. And when you talk about the properties that are not exempt, you're at about
1.5 at that time.
1.5. So a little over half of the city's potential tax base is exempt. And we're talking things like the university, schools, government buildings, churches, et cetera. And they're all off the tax rolls. So we're essentially running an entire city on half a tax roll, which is something other municipalities really don't have to deal with because they don't have the amenity that we have in terms of the University of Idaho here and all of the other good things that we have going on here. So it's a sword that cuts both directions, but it does limit the amount of funding the city can pull together to keep operations going. So, council, we have 3 actions before us here.
Do we have to do them all separately?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I move that we approve the foregone tax recovery resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that one? Okay. Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Haley,
Aye.
and Ann.
Aye.
Okay, that one passes. Now,
B.
I have a resolution here that I have to read, right?
Oh.
No.
Don't have to read it? Sweet. Okay,
Sandra has her hand up.
Sandra's got
Next.
her hand up, sir.
Sandra.
I move that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and then it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Further discussion, counselors? Okay. Haley,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Okay, that one passes, and we do have an ordinance that needs to be read. Which number? 2022-10. An ordinance entitled Annual Appropriation Ordinance appropriating $109,189,264 for the purpose of defraying all necessary expenses and liabilities of the city of Moscow, Latah County, state of Idaho, for the 2023 fiscal year, beginning the first day of October 2022 and ending the 30th day of September 2023, and allotting resources by fund for said appropriation for the objects and purposes set forth in this ordinance, levying ad valorem taxes in the amount of $7,859,905 for the 2023 fiscal year, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. And it turns out that reading those numbers as spelled out is a whole lot harder than reading them as actual
Indeed.
numbers. Wow. Okay, third,
Mr. Mayor.
Madam.
I move that we authorize the mayor's execution of the L2 property tax certification in the aggregate amount of $7,859,905.
Second.
She can have it.
Oh, I'm
Sandra.
sorry.
Okay, any further discussion on that one? Okay, Julia,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
Haley,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
and Maureen.
Aye.
Okay, excellent. That is taken care of. So, have a request for a quick break here, so we'll break for 5 minutes and come back at 8:05. Okay, it's 8:05 in a couple of seconds, and we're back in session, City Council regular meeting. Next up, another exciting public hearing. Same rules apply relative to the format and the way this works. This will be a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023 fee resolution, starring once again, Bill Beltnam.
Thank you, Your Honor. So in accordance with state law, anytime the city initiates a new fee or increases an existing fee by more than 5%, we're required to conduct a public hearing. This is our fee resolution hearing then for this evening. For the most part, many of the fees are being increased in that 3 to 5% just to account for increased cost of providing the services. So you'll see the land use and development permit fees are increasing generally in that range. Some building permit fees and inspection fees are being increased by that amount. They're going from $69 to $72. Plumbing permits, a number of electrical permits as well, all just moving along that inflationary cost. As we look at the utilities, we do have the water and sewer rates that are increasing by the percentages that I noted previously during the budget presentation. That include both the monthly services as well as cost for installation of new meters. We see the streets and storm department. You'll have the stormwater fees. We aren't changing them, but we are specifically calling out the direct discharge, ESU charge, the MS4 operator charge, and the K through 12 educational activities per ESU. So there's some credits you can receive underneath the stormwater program. We just didn't have those specifically called out in the fee resolution previously. We have increased also in the streets and storm department rental cost for city barricades and other traffic control devices. There was a concern that potentially people might choose to use us when we really aren't a rental shop. We want them to go to the appropriate, but in those immediate emergency situations where somebody needs to have some traffic control devices, we'll make those available. So we did increase those rates slightly to discourage them being used as a source of first resort. You'll see a couple areas. Alcohol event for permit was eliminated. Those all have been consolidated underneath the community events portion. You'll see we also added the impound fee for the shared mobility device of $25 per device per day for the program that was included in the license agreement. The other items of note for escort services for special events, we did add a holiday rate. So we had the situation where there was a parade on a holiday. When we have to call in staff and officers to work that, we end up paying them overtime because they're working on a holiday. So we've increased the reimbursement rate that was not in the fee resolution previously for those situations. The downtown parking permits are also making that final kind of step that we've been working on to bring them back to where they were in 2009. So the downtown parking permits used to be $365 per year in 2009 prior to the reduction that brought them down to 75. And then we've been incrementally increasing those every year. So they'll be back to 370 for a year. So just a little over $1 a day for parking in downtown 24 hours. Our fiber optic lease fees, our lease fees are increasing slightly with inflation. And then the other thing of note is you'll see that we have eliminated a lot of the sponsorships. I found it kind of unusual that we had sponsorships in a fee resolution because they're not a mandatory fee. There is something voluntarily does, and we can't predict what the amount is going to be. So we had the Rolling Hills half marathon sponsorship at $3,000, but we'll accept any type of goods or services or T-shirts or drinks and nutrition for those events. So there's really no need for those to be in our fee resolution. So those have been removed, and then the sanitation roll carts are being increased in accordance with what I indicated in the budget, as well as mechanical containers being decreased overall. So that's pretty much the bulk of the changes. We do have also Art Walk because it's a year-long event now for the season. There are new fees being established for Art Walk for the full season, which is $450 for the season, $100 for a nonprofit. So that's really the bulk of the changes. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
I had one on the last page of the fee resolution. The new section, event fees. I was curious why for the alcohol use application fee, it specifies non-refundable on page 28.
And Amanda left. I do not honestly know. other than it may just be the staff time it takes for that type of event. It has to get circulated among the police and fire and community development departments, and it's probably reflecting the work that goes into processing that permit and the investment we have in at that point. Then if they don't move on with the event, we won't refund that because the labor cost had already been incurred.
Does that imply that other fees that don't say non-refundable are refundable?
They can be. They're not, just not having it being non-refundable or stating non-refundable does not make it refundable. There have been situations where people have maybe paid a permit fee for a home and have asked for it to be refunded. Oftentimes, if we've already done the plan review, but we haven't done the construction inspection, we'll refund the construction inspection component, but retain the plan review because those services were provided. But very few fees ever get refunded unless it's a service that wasn't rendered.
Thanks.
I did have a refresh my memory question for you, please. You talked about the parking permits going to 370.
Yes.
And then you said for 1 year.
That's the cost for a year.
Okay. And
So we have monthly, quarterly, and yearly rates. So 370 is the yearly rate.
and it will not be 370 for a year's time and change again. It's 370 for 365 days.
Correct. Yes.
That was the
Yep.
clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions right now? Okay. At this point, we'll take public testimony in support of the fee resolution. Hello, public.
Mayor, you need to open the public hearing.
Oh, and the public hearing is now officially open.
Well, it's short. Victoria, Seaver, Moscow. Overall changes in fees are a prescribed mathematical formula. It's based on inbuilt inflation, safety, government requirements, maintenance and replacement, the need for services, and so on. It's basic math, or complicated math. Moscow staff routinely goes the extra mile or mini to trim corners, gain training to provide in-house services at significant cost savings, very important, and find ways to expand the toolbox, very important. It takes precision, cooperation, and a willingness to do right by the city. For the most part, when I trust the skill and the character of the trenches, I leave it to them to get the job done with the least burden of cost that they can manage. I see nothing less than that this round. So go for it.
Thank you, Victoria. Further testimony and support. Testimony in opposition. Testimony of a general nature. Okay, public hearing is closed. Council commences deliberations.
I think these look pretty good. I feel a bit nitpicky about the refundable, non-refundable thing. If others are non-refundable, why not just take that out and then people can figure that out when they apply? Why would it be the only one in a huge list that has non-refundable?
Suppose just to make it clear.
If I may, Amanda did text some information. She noted that's due to the extra staff time to present to admin and council, prepping the resolution and having legal do the review of the resolution. So it is about the staff time investment that goes into prepping it. I don't know that it is required to be stated as being non-refundable. If the services have been furnished and they just don't move forward with the event, then we would just retain the fee because we performed the services of having the resolution presented and approved.
My understanding of your reply earlier, though, is that we have some that are others that are non-refundable for similar reasons, right?
Virtually all fees are not refundable unless they're unique situations or circumstance by which somehow they paid a fee and the service wasn't rendered. I presume, like if you register for a Parks and Rec event and then you decide you don't want to participate, you can get a refund before the event begins. So it's under rare situations that we actually end up in a request for a refund.
If I'm a layperson and the only page I'm reading is the last one and only one says non-refundable, I don't think it's a stretch to think that you would think that some others were if it didn't specify.
And we could strike that. I mean, I don't think it's necessary for it to state non-refundable.
It's a small thing, but I would like it taken out.
My only concern about that is that if it doesn't say that, I mean, I'm not going to build my house, but I made everybody go through the entire process of permit, the permitting and all the work. Since I'm in the middle of construction right now, I know what all the things the city does and how often they have to visit my house. But if it gets halfway through and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen, people have to pay for what they got and what the service was. So I guess if I don't know if that got inserted there because people were getting grief about the fact, well, I didn't build my house. And if that's the case, then the answer is it's easier to sit there and say the product for which you applied, you didn't get, but it took us this much time to do it. I don't know if it got raised because people were upset. But to me, I think you pay for what you get. And if you've used it, you pay for it.
Go to Haley.
And for what it's worth, I'm scoping out the permit application, and it looks like both like the permanent one and like the temporary event one do both say non-refundable. So I'm with you, Ann. Like if you want to strike it from there, I think it's covered in more directly in the actual application that someone would go through.
And thank you for looking that up for us.
Sandra.
I guess just to be a little contrary on that, this is not anything to have to worry about a whole lot, but I can't help but think if staff put it in there, there's probably a reason for it. And I can imagine that maybe with the alcohol portion, maybe people go through that whole process and then decide not to do it with more often than the other parts. So I mean, if staff had it in there, I feel like there's probably a reason for it. I'm sorry they're not there to back that up, but I would hate to add a weird burden to them for that reason. So take that for what it's worth. It's not a hill I want to spend a lot of time on, but just that's where I'm at.
Go ahead.
I have to say that if since this discussion has happened, and if, as you say, Mr. Belknap, virtually all of our fees are non-refundable, I would sooner see it in a policy or in each of the preambles to whatever permits we're doing rather than in the fee resolution. So I guess Ann, we maybe need to write this day down that you and I are agreeing on something. But I have to say, I would rather have it be in preamble and in the interaction with the staff where it is very clear that it is non-refundable. The fee that they're paying is non-refundable rather than tucked in red or it'd be black in the real thing, but tucked into a fee resolution that nobody reads.
Yeah, because I think this is table format, right? So someone's not coming here to look up the exact, staff is directing them to the, application. You're trying to get a scope of the fees. This is the place to look. And I think if you want to be consistent about it, great, put it everywhere. Or like you're saying, an intro, but otherwise I think it's odd and out of place and inconsistent.
And either way works for us, to be honest. I don't think people go to the fee resolution to look for the fees. They call the department, they get the application has the fees on it. So I don't think the public, this is the first location. It's where I go because, I know they're all in one location.
Right.
But as staff, if you want to remove non-refundable, that's fine. Administratively in the program and on the applications that currently exist, we cover it. So I'm comfortable with it there. I'm comfortable with it be removed. It's whatever the council's pleasure.
With this big important change agreed upon, it seems like I would move that we approve the fiscal year 2023 fee resolution with one change, which is the removal of non-refundable.
I second that. There we go. I'm going to write it down too.
Further discussion. Okay, with that, we all know what we're voting for, approving the fee resolution with one change, deleting the non-refundable clause. And we'll go forth. Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Haley,
Aye.
Ann.
I
Okay, that one passes. Good stuff.
That's fine.
Okay, item number 8, we come to the Downtown Streetscape Study update from Cody Riddle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As Bill mentioned earlier this evening, the 2015 strategic plan identified the aging infrastructure of our downtown as one of the major challenge areas we'll be facing. Most of the improvements, as Bill mentioned, you see above ground date back to the early 80s. and those below ground substantially older than that. With that, in May of this year, the city entered into a professional services agreement with Welch Comer Engineers. They're going to be providing us with design and engineering services for the downtown streetscape project. That effort will be jointly funded with the Urban Renewal Agency. You'll hear us as we move forward over the coming months refer to this as a study, and I think that's important because that's exactly what it is at this point in time. It will certainly culminate in a conceptual design complete with a phasing plan and cost estimate, and it's that information that will help us start to identify funding and put some parameters around the development of construction plans. There's certainly lots of evaluating to do and lots of public input to receive, which we've started with that process. And the consultant team will talk about that in a minute. It's only after that, though, that we'll start to understand where we should invest and then ultimately where we can invest in improvements. It's certainly important that we acknowledge there are constraints, both financially and practically, as we move forward. It's that conceptual design that we'll end up with out of this process that'll help us navigate that process. So with that, I would like to turn it over for a presentation by the consultant team. Matt Gillis and Courtney Kramer are here from Welch Comer to walk you through where we've been today and where we're going from here. So thank you.
The Audiovisual Club meets again. For those who remember that far back, 16 millimeter, all that good stuff.
No one knows that except you.
Oh, no. I
I was-
see smirking out there.
I was too. I was just busting on you.
Yep, got it before. Thank you. Well, good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. Matt Gillis, Welch Comer Engineers. As Cody mentioned, my colleague, Courtney Kramer. We're going to tag team a quick presentation for you. We've been pretty busy gearing up with this is a really special project for Moscow, and we're excited about it. We've had a lot of interaction with a lot of people in town, and it's been, not everybody agrees, of course, but it's been productive. So we're going to give you a brief, I know you've had a long night, so we'll give you a pretty brief update. Feel free to stop us at any time with any comments or feedback. But I'm going to walk you through the review of the scope real quick, because I don't know when the last time you've heard what the scope is. Courtney will discuss in detail our strategy for outreach, all the different tentacles we have out there to talk to everybody. And then we'll summarize what we've heard so far, and then very quickly tell you what our next steps are. And then maybe at the end, we'll ask you in general, are we on the right track? Because that would be very helpful to us. So the scope of this study project is really, it's the entire downtown. Think of it as everything between the couplets, the southbound 95, the northbound 95, everything shown in that light green there. Now, that's the study area. That doesn't necessarily mean that will be the ultimate construction area, because at some point, budget becomes part of this conversation, right? And so, but we're going to study the whole thing right now, and then as we get further into the process, other decisions will be made at your level. We're in the front door of this project. We're at the very beginning stages, top of the funnel, which Courtney will talk about in a moment. It's high level planning, concept design. That's where we're at right now. So that's the phase that you've turned staff and us loose on, and that's what we'll execute. Down the road, if you choose to move forward, there'll be a design phase, a construction phase, and then probably most importantly, an implementation phase, which is pretty important to take care of what you've done. So I'm going to turn it over real quick to Courtney, our public involvement expert, and she's going to share the strategy and kind of the tenets about what the message we're trying to share.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening on this first day of August. There's a beautiful sunset happening out the window there, and we can enjoy out on the Palouse tonight. So we really want to compliment the city of Moscow for their investment in community-driven design. Your community really loves its Main Street. We describe it as Main Street is your community's living room. It's really fun to see you close it and create a space for your community to gather. And I would argue that those fantastic community events are all excellent platforms for the human connection that makes a community a strong place to be. So you are to be congratulated for the investments that the city of Moscow has made in both the infrastructure and the physical place, but also the programming and the staff time. Sorry, I did not run that past Matt first, but that's my opinion. I'll footnote that. So our approach to this project has a 4-component outreach strategy. All of them are interlocking. Kind of that base level is the street design. And this is the thing: street layout, pedestrian access, number of lanes, bicycle facilities, and stormwater collection. We are not recommending any type of significant street design modification, only tweaks to improve access and stormwater treatments. And we'll talk about that a little bit. The next layer is that streetscape. This is the above ground, the rhythm and pattern you feel of maybe it's a street tree every 35 feet and then a garbage can and then a bench and that kind of consistent feeling along a street. The third component is amenities. And these are the things that are slightly different, but it's artwork on every corner. It's a water feature in one area, a playground area. It's more public art. The last one, of course, is parking. Our communities, especially on the Palouse, we all travel between the Quad Cities, and it's wonderful to have such a bikeable and walkable town. Your businesses definitely recognize that many of their customers travel from other communities by car. And so for your businesses, it is important. We did ask, and Matt will talk about this in a minute, there is an opportunity to maybe increase some parking in some lots and lose a little bit of parking on the street to improve ADA accommodations and stormwater treatment. So those are the 4 categories that we're pursuing outreach in. Our strategy has 3 components. Your staff has been fantastic to work with. We had a great meeting, I believe in June. It's all running together. But in June, to talk with your staff about technical, operational, and maintenance issues, it's everything right from what's the best way to pull the farmer's market out of a storage container like you're the Grinch that stole Christmas, bringing Christmas back to Whoville, to how do we make sure that snow removal ensures safety for community members patronizing businesses during the winter months. We're grateful for your appointment of a steering committee that represents a variety of downtown stakeholder interests. They've been very helpful in helping us format the project. They will be helpful in helping us hear that public feedback and making sure that we're processing and distilling it correctly. And then they will ultimately provide you with a recommendation on projects, both the projects themselves, but also ways in which you might prioritize those over time. As part of community-driven design, the general public and stakeholders are an important component. We've had already one public meeting, and in the next couple of weeks, Cody's team will be deploying a public engagement booth at several community events. It is gloriously low tech. Everybody gets either a gold star if you're a kid or a silver star if you're above the age of 20, and you get a vote. And I think it's a great way to be able to receive feedback in a way that's very inclusive.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
So we're a college town.
Yeah.
Why is 20 the cutoff for youth versus adult?
We're happy to modify it.
My 2 cents, I'd love to see that number move. I worry a lot that there's a lot of college kids who come to town and either feel like a transient population and don't feel like their buy-in to what town looks like or feels like matters. And I would also say I'm fighting for a lot of high school kids to want to stay in Moscow and see a future here. So I don't know what the magic number is, but I'd love to see that number come a little lower to include some of our teen population, because they've got hot takes for days. I promise you. I'd love to have them incorporated.
I love it. We'd be happy to drop it to 18 if that hits the sweet spot. Okay. I'll circle back to Moscow High School in a second. So this is the planning process. We call it the funnel at the top. It's the widest. We're talking to as many people. We're gathering as much information as we can about how we're telling people about the process. We're gathering their feedback about challenges, what's working, what's not working, how can things be tweaked or modified to continue to enhance Moscow's incredibly vital downtown. And then we move through this process where on the left, we go out and get feedback from the community. On the right, our consulting team uses that feedback to develop concepts and to create work product. And then we come back to the community and again say, okay, here's what we heard, here's some concepts. What do you think about them? We receive that feedback, then we go back over to the left and so on and so forth. Ultimately, we're tentatively scheduled to be back in front of the City Council in mid-October and again in early December to pursue the project adoption. So let's talk about what we heard from the steering committee. Great folks. We're very grateful to the Moscow Chamber of Commerce for hosting our steering committee meeting. What's working? Moscow has a great and vital downtown. Your businesses and your property owners have reinvested to create great business spaces. I love the moniker, the best fest city in Idaho. The community is very focused on being inclusive and open-minded and safe, friendly and welcoming. I do want to note that there is a difference between being friendly and welcoming, and I appreciated that the steering committee talked about that. Quirky and eclectic. What could be better? ADA access. I appreciated that your steering committee flagged really early in the process that they want to see these projects result in better accessibility for everyone, including, from the moms with strollers to kids learning to walk and tripping on curbs to our elderly population. They acknowledge deteriorating infrastructure, curbs, things like that. Festival services, your community loves to throw a good party on Main Street, and it does take quite a bit of work to make that happen. And how could we use this as an opportunity to be more efficient? Street, pedestrian, and tree lighting, always opportunities for more ambiance and character, public spaces. And then how do we have events in the winter, especially here on the Palouse where it's often dark and you're like, is it going to rain or snow? Which shoes do I wear? I'm not sure. What makes downtown Moscow so unique? Diversity of restaurants, the convergence of education and agriculture, the diverse population. That proximity to Moscow High School is such an interesting thing to see in a downtown. Moscow and actually Clarkston, where I live, are the two quad cities that still have their high school downtown. And frankly, the economic impact that it has, and to your point, that emotional tie about how you keep your youth engaged is really great. And of course, the walkable downtown. We talked as well about the importance of the City of Moscow's investment in programming and amenities. Community support for locally owned businesses is really strong. And also the use of those public parking lots and alley side entrances. As I've done a series of stakeholder interviews, the stakeholders have really said, hey, our alley entrance gets as much use as our front door. And that helps us as we think about how a project might be phased to ensure that businesses, or to try to minimize impact to businesses. A project will always impact businesses, but having an alley entrance that's cleaned up and looks good and welcoming will be really important. Again, what could be better? You're starting to see themes here: accessibility, an infrastructure plan to prevent duplicating reinvestments, and the ability to host events throughout downtown Moscow. I have declared the presence of electric power at Friendship Square to be the egg that laid the chicken. Because there's not power up and down Main Street, you can't move that chicken around. And so spreading that out means that so many, both the City of Moscow, the Chamber, and all of the community organizations that host events are able to think about alternate locations. And of course, the physical connectivity to the university and how you really create both a line of sight, but also a pathway.
I have a question. Could you expand for us on that second bullet point, infrastructure plan to prevent duplication?
Yeah, you all have some great community members who've replaced the sidewalk in front of their business in the last 10 years. And it's a possibility that we may have to tear that up. Yeah, that's a bummer.
Thank you for expanding.
In terms of process and comments, we talked a lot about how construction will disrupt businesses. I, in those conversations, have encouraged those stakeholders to think, okay, well, let's say in the next 5 years, the street in front of your business is torn up. Is that an opportunity to reinvest in your building, in your facade? It's certainly an opportunity to maybe put in a new water line, a new sewer line, maybe a storm trap, or wrong words, grease interceptor for a restaurant, all of those things that could make the building more diverse and flexible in the future. Think about those opportunities and think about how you might finance them. Also, it will disrupt beloved community events, some of which are key funding sources for those community organizations. And the earlier we can work with these organizations and then they can let their sponsors know, the better. And of course, because the community cares about downtown Moscow and desires thoughtful reinvestment, your community really wants to be engaged in the project. And I think that's fantastic. Love to see some big coming soon signs for public infrastructure at some point. Let me see here. Matt, this is you. Feedback.
So it's been a couple of weeks now. We had our first public meeting right in here. We had a pretty good turnout. We did we started with a presentation to arm them with information. Then we had them walk through different stations where we got a little more detailed in the information we had presented. That was our second attempt to arm them with more information. And then we started asking them questions. What's your feedback? And we did some online polling, which I have all the slides if you'd like me to go through the nitty-gritty detail, but we've done our best to distill what we think that you need to know at this point as your first update. So as Courtney talked about those 4 quadrants, the puzzle pieces, the blue one was the street design. And one of the things we talked about was that we got a lot of positive feedback on is to utilize kind of non-standard or innovative street design methods. And think about what Friendship Square is where it crosses Main Street, right? There's no curb there. It's all at grade. And so we talked a lot about something like that. Could that be expanded elsewhere on Main Street? And there was a lot of discussion like, oh yeah, that does sound like it would be cool. I heard cool a lot. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean it would be appropriate for the entire length because it can be expensive. But people in general were very much in favor of thinking outside the box a little bit. How can we make this a little more intimate? Maybe blur the lines a little bit between where pedestrians can go. So that was very helpful. And we'll elaborate on that more as we get further into the plan. The other hot button item was stormwater. Right now, stormwater on Main Street, side streets, and the alleys finds itself in Paradise Creek untreated, okay? So the general consensus was, well, if we can do better, we should do better. Where we have opportunities to treat that stormwater somehow, some way with things like, perhaps these infiltration areas, these rain gardens, to move the needle on water quality where we can. Very much in favor of that. The public attendees also, and this is intuitive, they want their Main Street to be, and side streets, to be as welcoming as possible to pedestrians. And then we heard 3 or 4 times, hey, it's great that we close Main Street for our one-day festivals, whether it's farmers market or whatever it might be, but why don't we close it for an entire weekend, every weekend? I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that's what we're hearing. Streetscape, a lot of talk about is it appropriate to move away from just the standard black asphalt and gray concrete sidewalk? Does that change the character and feel of your downtown? And generally, yes. People like the idea of different colors, different textures. And those come in the form of colored concrete pavers, clay pavers, those types of things. And variety is good, we heard, but we'd want to be careful with that one. Some variety is good, but yeah. Trees, as you can imagine, trees are very important. Once you cut them down, you don't get them back for several decades to a mature level. But what we heard from the folks is, well, obviously we want to save as many trees as we can. But if there are individual trees or small areas of trees here and there that just have to change because some other infrastructure issue or alignment issue needs to happen, they understood that. And I think for the council, the vibe I got from the people was, if we have to lose, 5% of the trees, 10% of the trees, that could be acceptable. It's not we're fine losing half the trees or anything like that. We're just being very, very clear. And we would never advocate for that. So that's what we heard on the streetscape with respect to hardscape and the trees. And then the amenity conversation, a lot of discussion about Friendship Square. And really the general input we wanted from them was, well, if we had our druthers and if money was no object, what do you do with Friendship Square? Is it, well, you could do nothing. That wasn't very popular. Or is it let's just refresh what's there, because what's there in general is working. It just needs to be updated, needs to be refreshed. The other end of the spectrum is, let's start over. Let's rip everything out and start with something new and different. Generally, I would say 75% of the people or more were on the refresher side of things. The fountain was another topic that was discussed. Everybody acknowledged the cultural significance and the historical significance of the fountain. At the same time, they also acknowledged the condition of it, the practicality of it, the sanitation of it, and the safety of it. And understand that at some point, that particular fountain might need some attention. And I don't know if it's removal, replacement, rehabilitation. I don't know that yet. But what the public shared was, we think it's important that there is some type of water feature downtown. And I don't know if it's in Friendship Square, but downtown somewhere. And I said, well, what do you mean water feature? And I asked several people this, and they said, well, I don't know. It could be a fountain. It could be a waterfall. It could even be a splash pad where the kids activate it and it sprays for 2 minutes and shuts off. And then they activate it again, it sprays for a couple minutes and shuts off. I think the point is, water feature was important to those in attendance of the public meeting. Any questions so far? Did I get everything on there? Oh, public art, important, as to be expected. And then the amenities that are selected eventually to be implemented should be distributed throughout Main Street and side streets, throughout downtown. I keep saying Main Street, but I mean downtown, and not clustered in one location. The parking one, we know this is a sensitive topic. It is in every downtown. And what we're trying to get out of the attendees was initially their gut. And the question was, do you feel that you're over or under parked in the downtown area? And we had, before we solicited an answer, we had to give them context in that. And I think I said something like, okay, it's Saturday night and you're driving to go to your favorite restaurant. If you can't park in front of your favorite restaurant and you have to walk 200 yards because you can't park on Main Street right in front of where you want to be at Tapped, that does not mean you have a parking problem. That means you have a vibrant downtown. And so parking, a little bit of difficulty in parking is a good thing in your downtown. So helping them understand that, the answers were all over the board. Some felt it was a pain, some felt it was no problem at all. Many, though, felt that, and this is a theme you heard from Courtney, that ADA accessibility is important. You have stalls out there that are ADA accessible. The paint says they are, but the infrastructure, they're not accessible. Parking garage was mentioned a few times.
Always is.
Yeah. Not a surprise. When we asked those that said, well, we think parking is fine downtown, our follow-up question was, well, okay, how much parking would you be willing to give up in exchange for some other amenity. Maybe it's a bike corral or the on-street dining where diners can expand out into the streets. And without getting into the numbers, 2/3 said they'd be willing to give up some parking. Now, again, this is just gut, right? There's no science to this yet. This is just their gut, which is important. So that's a quick rundown of the high-level stuff we heard from the very productive public meeting. It was great. And so our next steps after tonight, we're going to get to work in developing some concepts so that we have something to show to our steering committee at the end of this month. As Courtney mentioned, the city, I'm going to hand Cody a bunch of products tomorrow that he's going to deploy his staff or your staff to, I'm not sure the events, the exact events, but many events where we're going to get more public feedback. And and then our second public meeting is, I guess, middle October. Yes, ma'am.
So one question that I have has to do with, I love the idea of the different, colors and whatnot, and what the sidewalks look like and what they don't. I also know that walking down them, different types of brick and different cement have different slickness to them. Will the designs that you present be consistent and as, I know you can't protect against the ice and the police, I get that, but be as safe as possible and not kind of a willy-nilly like, oh, I can walk here, but I can't walk there kind of thing?
Great question. Yes, we would seek to have a consistent texture of,
Thank you.
very good question. Yes, ma'am.
So I attended the public meeting and I thought it was very interesting the way it was structured. And in terms of getting people's feedback, it was a really great way to do that and answer questions kind of in grouping. And what I just wanted to point out, one thing that I did appreciate on that was the idea that it was dreaming, I think of it as dreaming, or conceptual, because some of that stuff was like, talk about different papers. It was raised that, this is going to cost a whole lot more money. But the focus wasn't, wow, this is going to cost $1 bazillion and this is going to cost 10. So that people could think big. And then when prices come in, we can do it. So it's kind of, I'm glad that you're not starting with money at this point and let people have conceptions. In terms of those fountains, Boise Center has one of those little fountains that comes up periodically.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the update. I look forward to hearing the next update.
We'll be back.
A little soap opera.
Yeah. Okay. So we got that. So we move on now and we're into reports. So Sandra, you're always first.
I think, gosh, and I even tried to look at my calendar. I think the only meeting that I had was the Human Rights Commission. And as I sat there, I thought, I can't wait for fall because I love fall and I love winter and I love fall and I love winter, and how great that they're planning for fall. And they are just rolling headlong into their September of Inclusive Community Month. And they're still planning, but lots of different things going on between food and talks and events and movies. I'm very much looking forward to that. September's fun. You never know what you're going to get on the Palouse, whether it's hot, cold, wet, dry, probably all the same and all one day. And I think they're planning accordingly. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they'll put together the entire month of September.
Very good. Ready to roll, Maureen?
Nope.
No, okay. Gina.
This is quite possibly my favorite week of the month because, yes, tomorrow is Tree Commission. And so the only thing I would have to remind you all about is in your utility billing, there should be some information on how to water those mature trees. That's a big deal. I'm right now learning how to water a ginkgo in my yard. So know that that's an important thing in this lovely weather we're having. But I'll have an update for you next council meeting on the Tree Commission. That's all I've got for you, sir.
And
Yeah, we had an interesting discussion at Parks and Rec because there was an update on the Eddington Park development. And because of the new development plans, there's an increase to the park requirement. And so they're deciding that they're going to build a 1.63 acre park and they're going to defer it to phase 2 so that rather than having little chunks of park, they're going to have one big one that's pretty centrally located and is nice because it has some pretty good flat topography. So that was cool. And we talked about the different requirements depending on which zoning designation it had, which I didn't actually know. They're different, which makes sense because if you have denser zoning, that you would have a higher requirement. And so, yeah, that was very informative. And that's all I've got.
Maureen?
Yeah. So I had no commission meetings, but I went to the Streetscape presentation, which I said was great. I also did the rapid market assessment training so that I could volunteer to put little dots, get people to put dots on evaluating the, our market, our Saturday market. It's really great. And people were really responding to it. And I love the idea of using dots as a way of getting people to evaluate what they like and they don't like. So if you go to the market, please agree to put little dots on there in terms of what you like and what you'd like to see different.
Okay, Haley.
I had a smart transit meeting. We are still working on hiring for a new executive director. And so Gina has been leading the charge on that as president, which has been awesome to see come together. I also attended a WITCOM meeting. I know that Bill had sent out an email letting us know that we've got some help from Npd helping them with some of their response stuff, which is important, and I'm grateful for that. I just was reading an article that Kootenai County is having to reduce their emergency response ability right now because of their shortage of dispatch workers. So, and they're paying great, culture's great over there. So if you know anyone who needs a job, WITCOM's hiring. And they're going through some pretty significant equipment upgrades as well. And yeah, I was at the very toasty farmers market 2 weekends ago for the rapid market assessment. And so tomorrow at the Farmers Market Commission, we'll be unpacking the first batch of data and the economic impact of the market. And one of the most important questions they're asking is if you would want to buy some cool swag branded with Moscow Farmers Market stuff. So it's a really important survey, really important. I'm not supposed to call it a survey. It's a really important gathering of information. That's what I'll give you. And that's what I got. Julia.
Okay, sorry. Let's see. I had Sustainable Environment Commission, and we talked about composting and biodigesters and windrows and all the different ways you can compost. We also talked about WSU's new program on carbon conscious construction, which is a really cool joint program between architecture and engineering there. I also went to the downtown streetscape workshop thing. Sorry, I forget what it was called, but it was awesome. Well, really, really well done presentations and gathering of information, and they got lots of feedback. And I talked to our consultants a little bit about how important downtown is to people in Moscow and how passionate people feel about trees and fountains and different things like that. So I hope that lots of people get involved in these early stages so they can have some input. And then I went on vacation to the Oregon coast, and then I got COVID, which is why I'm on the screen.
Well, we hope
so hopefully I'll be out of quarantine soon.
Well, you seem to be in good voice, so
yeah,
hang in there.
I'm thankful for modern medicine.
Yes. So, okay, as for me, I had meetings with representatives from Senator Risch and Governor Little over the last couple of weeks, going over issues of how municipalities feel about federal and state practices, funding, and other such issues. So it was really very interesting having chats with them and hopefully sending some messages back up the stream. Also had Idaho Transportation Department workshop down in Lewiston, where we discussed current ITD projects and looking into the future where ITD wants to head with some of their larger projects involving not only Moscow, but the entirety of District 2, and find out where their heads are for the state highway system and how that could possibly impact Moscow going into the future so that we can be better prepared ourselves.
Do you want to give us any details?
Probably not, because it's all
Sparked my
very
interest.
nebulous as yet. It's lovely thoughts, but as always, how much you got. So it's turns down to money. And
Can I add something there, though? I do think, because I have to watch some of what happens with the Washington State Department of Transportation, and it's not a competition. It's never a competition about what state or communities are better. I get it, but I have to commend ITD I really appreciate that they have a division-specific approach, and there's times where it can feel like the state of Ada is driving a lot of those really expensive construction decisions, but I will say that a number of the people who are working in the Boise office are coming from our districts and really are fighting for the smaller improvements and the smaller bridge replacements that may feel like a really expensive replacement, but are the lifeline for a lot of our smaller communities. And so they have a tough job. I don't want it. And they do what they can, at least, to make sure that the little guy's being heard. And I feel like I don't see the same sort of divide that you can sometimes see with Washington on each side of the Cascade. So they have a hard job in front of them, and they are sitting flush with cash right now. So we're going to hope they know how to spend it. So
yep,
my 2 cents.
So bottom line there, stay tuned for future developments, and we'll see where they land, hopefully in good ways. So what you got over there, staff?
Nothing else from staff this evening.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our regular meeting. However, I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session per Idaho Code 74-206, 1 or I and F, and the meeting will not convene afterwards.
So
Second.
moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, Julia,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
Haley,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Maureen.
Aye.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. We're going into executive session, and we won't be back.